Can I be the co-host today because I want to show later some videos?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think Jody's on. He can do the co-host part because I'm not officially the host in Zoom.
Okay, because at this
Jody
moment
has that
I'm
right
not able
now.
to share videos.
Yeah.
Done, Ralph. I just made the amendment.
Okay, cool.
Look smart, people stupid.
So, hello to everyone, and I see we have a big group today, and I'm very happy about the amount of athletes today again. Today is a very easy ride for you. It's only 1 hour 45 minutes recon ride. This is perfect because then you are able to listen to our guest of today, and I'm very happy that we have Pieter du Preez, is this right, from South Africa as our guest.
Yes, that's correct. How's it, guys? Happy and privileged to join you guys tonight.
So this is, in my eyes, one of the athletes in the last 10 years or maybe 15 years, which changed the view on his abilities. So if I'm seeing what he reached in the last 10, 15 years with his handicap, I think it's impressive. And before we talk with him, I want to show you a short video about him, and then we will talk with Pieter. So have a 4 minutes video for you, and let's do.
There's no line defining before and after my accident. In my mind, it's just one continuous path. I was running before my accident, and I'm still running, just in a slightly different way. Number of days in ICU, 42. Number of days on a ventilator, 32. Fastest time for getting dressed is 2 minutes 41. Fastest time to get in the car is 1 minute and 18 seconds. Number of international marathons I've won, 3. My time for the full Ironman, 13 hours and 24 minutes. It's now been 10 years and 6 months since I became C6 quadriplegic.
Your video is off.
C6 quadriplegic means that you're completely paralyzed from your nipples down. You only have limited arm function. I don't have any triceps. I don't have any finger or hand movement. I only have wrist extension, biceps, and shoulder. I'm the first quad in the world to do Ironman. For Ironman triathlon, I have to make the able-bodied cut-off times. You have to almost train like an able-bodied pro Ironman athlete would train. So I spent about 40 hours on training per week. I always have numbers when I train in my head. People think I've got an obsession with numbers. I time silly things like getting dressed, 2 minutes and 41 seconds, how long it takes me to get in and out of the bath. I've gone under 5 minutes from getting in the bath and then out again. Time myself getting out of the car and up the lift to my work office. I'm actually an actuarial analyst. I work with numbers on a daily basis. It's like I'm a double agent leading a double life, doing numbers by day at work, but doing numbers when I'm doing sport, doing numbers when I'm just getting dressed. You know, it hasn't even sunk in that I actually managed to do that Ironman. It's 3.8 kilometers swimming in the sea, followed by 180 kilometers on the bike, which I cycle on the hand cycle. And then it's a full marathon running, which is 42.2 kilometers, and I do that in the racing chair. Despite being the first one in the world to finish Ironman, I would still say something that ranks even higher than that is becoming completely independent. I'm one of the fortunate few that has the sports structure and financial means to be able to carry on and live a full life, a quality life. You know, there's been a lot of research in spinal cord injuries and finding a cure for it. The big reason that I would like to see a cure is not for myself. It's actually for the other guys out there. I see how they struggle with depression for years. Some never get over the fact that they're in a wheelchair. It saddens me to see those guys, and I hope that I'm inspiration for them. In the end, you know, if there's a cure for spinal cord injuries, you know, that will just fix everything. A lot of people think there must be days where it just gets too much or it just gets too hard. The moment my mind just wants to think things are too much, I just realize what impact I make on a daily basis. One day can make a difference. I often get told, you know, that I've got a second chance at life. I disagree with that. In some cases, I actually feel like I was born to be a quant. The day my accident happened, there was no mistake. I made certain choices on that day that got me at the exact time and place for that car to hit me and me breaking my neck. I don't look back because it is what it is. And I'm hoping the way I'm living my life now as a quadriplegic is inspiration to all out there. You know, for me, this is not the end and neither is it the beginning. I'm still following the same path.
Very cool. Peter, congratulations first for this very good movie. I think you are very happy about the support.
Yes, yeah, no, it was a very special movie, and it was actually made for the Wings for Life World Run the first year that they started doing the Wings for Life World Run. So yeah, it's a very special memory, but it's actually quite far back in 2014. So a lot has happened since then. So yeah, but yeah, very, very nice to have that kind of footage.
Okay, cool. Can you introduce yourself a little bit first before we going deeper in everything, what you reached and what your goals could be in the future?
Yes. So when you say introduce myself, just, you know, just general, I'm Pieter du Preez, and yeah, I'm now 41 years old. I've been quadriplegic since October 2003. I broke my neck. I was actually out cycling beforehand. Before my accident, I was actually already sort of semi-professional in triathlon, sort of focused on triathlon, still studying at varsity. And then I broke my neck in 2003. And yeah, now, you know, many things have happened over the years, still doing a lot of sport. I work as an actuarial analyst at Deloitte. That's a lot of stats and maths in the actuarial insurance solutions department. And yeah, I'm a father of a 3.5-year-old boy, which is probably the most amazing thing of my life. And I've got a very incredible wife who I met after my accident, and we've now been married for 13 years almost. So I think that's me. Is that good enough for introduction?
Yes, for sure. That was a pretty good introduction. I think it's not your first time when you speak to a big group. So I think it will be a very nice evening for us. For the others, maybe a good morning. The first thing I want to talk about you is I know you, or I've seen you the first time during a competition in 2015, I think, in Germany during the World Cup in Elzach. And I've seen you a long time only as a hand cyclist, but you are not started with hand cycling, right? You started with racing chair.
Yes, yeah, well, to be honest, when I did start looking at sports, I actually did start with triathlon. Because, you know, when I started looking at all these sports in 2008 Paralympics, for instance, there was no sports for H1, well, for quadriplegics, T51, H1, for my category, C6 quadriplegic. So I ended up deciding to chase my own dreams, of which a crazy one was to do an Ironman. So I actually did start swimming, cycling, and wheelchair racing sort of almost at the same time in 2004. I'd already sort of started doing these things. So, but yes, internationally, my first race was in the racing chair at the Berlin Marathon. That was my first sort of international race that I participated in. And then I only started internationally racing in the handbike sort of in 2010. I started doing my first race overseas.
Okay. And with your injury height, for sure you have only a small amount of muscles you can use for the sport.
Yes.
And I'm very impressed about the idea to do a Ironman with this small amount of muscle mass. Yeah, it's incredible. And
Thanks.
can you maybe a little bit more explain the size of your muscle mass for the others?
Yes.
Maybe there is not everyone who know this really, how
Yes.
small this amount is.
Yes. So look, I think first of all, I don't want to bloat or say how good it is, but I don't think people understand how incredible it is for somebody with my muscle function to finish an Ironman and do it in the cutoff times. And doing it in 2013, technology has improved since then. But yes, so essentially, I'm functionally a C6 quadriplegic. And many quadriplegics doesn't want to believe that I can do what I do. They think I have tricep function or this one cheating or whatever, because there's always these things in the sport. But I'm always very happy to show people exactly what I have, show my muscles, and my peers in my sporting category, I think, has got a lot of respect, and we've got a lot of respect for each other because we know we are the true H1s. But essentially the muscles that I do have is my wrist extension, which is this movement. I can lift up my wrist very strongly, my biceps and my shoulders. That is the muscle function I have. I've got no hand or finger movement other than my wrist function. I've got very, very little tricep function. It's not functional. I cannot lift my arm up if I do that over into the air against gravity. So it's basically no functional tricep function, which is really the big muscle that I'm missing. And then obviously from the chest, I'm completely paralyzed down. And I think something that a lot of people also don't realize, able bodies and maybe paraplegics who's not very much into sports yet, etc., is another thing that us as quadriplegics miss is that I can't sweat. So I can overheat very easily. So I don't sweat at all. I can be racing at 12 in 35, 40 degrees Celsius, and you will not see a drip of sweat coming off my face. So that's also a very big impairment. And on top of that, I can't get my heart rate up. My max heart rate when I'm doing very hard intervals on the bike, I struggle to reach 120 for my heartbeat. And that's actually the biggest impairment compared to paraplegics, and even the H2 quadriplegics, they struggle with that, but they can even get their heart rates higher. And then of course, I've also got very low blood pressure. And all of these things are things that make it so much harder for us quadriplegics, and especially the C6 H1 T51s, to compete, in endurance events. And yeah, so doing that Ironman, it is really special. Look, it was incredibly hard training, and there was a lot of things and planning, etc., on how to do it. But honestly, I think the most amazing part, which I just have to mention, is that 6 weeks before that, for anybody who doesn't believe that they can do anything, 6 weeks before that Ironman, I broke my forearm in 3 pieces. 6 weeks before, and a plate was put in, and I still went and I finished that Ironman. And I mean, there's a big story behind that and why I still had to do it and wanted to do it, etc. But if you put your mind to something, anything is possible. And I did some crazy things and took some crazy risks, but it was all calculated. But a lot is possible if you really put your mind to it and you want to do it.
Cool. What have been your time for the swim? Because the swim, I think it's one of the things which is very difficult to imagine, how you can swim 3.8K without the legs,
Yes.
without the trunk muscles. So this is incredible.
Yes, so the swim, I do a double arm backstroke because I can't swim if I'm on my stomach. I can't breathe, and because I don't have the tricep, I can't pull through. So it's pointless to even try. So I do a double arm backstroke, and fair enough. In the swim, I normally ask somebody to, either a lifesaver to go be next to me, or somebody to swim behind me and help keep my direction by tapping my feet, just to keep my direction. But the double arm backstroke is my quickest stroke, if I could put it that way. And I did play around with many different strokes because I had to figure out how to swim by myself. But my time for the swim in that first one was 1 hour 39, but I have swum 1 hour 26, 3.8 kilometer. So, and I don't get out of the water to be honest, that swim time, I'm in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
I've also done the Robben Island crossing, which is an 8 kilometer swim in 15-degree water. I'd still wore the wetsuit, but even that 8 kilometer swim, I swam just over 3 hours. So, I'm averaging close to 2 minutes 20 per 100 in that Ironman. I did 126. I was averaging 2 minutes 15 per 100 meters. So it's fairly decent and hard to imagine that it's possible. But that's the crazy thing. When I started, I would never believe that I would be able to do it that fast. But as you get going and just get better and better and you keep working at it, it's crazy where you can end up.
Yeah, absolutely. And for your knowledge, I'm coaching as well non-handicapped triathletes. And I have some athletes which will be very happy if they come below 130 out of the water for the long distance. So
Yes.
maybe I will show them next time a video of you, and then they're doing on the backside.
Well, hopefully it'll make them train a bit harder.
Yeah, okay.
But look, we all have different abilities though, so I am probably a fairly decent athlete. So, but I take my hat off to anybody who does finish Ironman.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have a cut off for the hand cycling. And if you're doing the 180K, what was the time for that? And how you manage the cooling and the nutrition?
Yes. Can I just ask, there's somebody's microphone on, so there's some background noise. I don't know if everybody can just mute their microphones, if possible. Oh, I don't know, there's still a bit of background noise. I don't know if it's just me. But yeah, so on the bike, for that first one, I was averaging, I think it was close to 23 Ks an hour for the full 180 kilometers. So, that sounds very slow, which it probably is for paraplegics, but for my class, to do that over 180 Ks at that point in time, there were guys who, for a marathon distance in a drafting race, wouldn't be able to do that at that point in time. So, and the scary thing is I think I needed to average at least close to 22 just to make the cutoff of the able bodies. So I needed to do that speed. Look, and to be honest, sitting here even today, I still can't believe I did that 6 weeks after breaking my forearm. I mean, that for me is just insane. So look, it was a lot of grace from God above. That day was a miracle, to be honest. But yeah, that was the speed I averaged for the 180.
Yes, and how you manage the nutrition and the cooling during this time because of your injury height, thinking it's very difficult because everything it's to drink, to eat, everything it's more difficult.
Yes. Look, so I've been very clever about how I do things. So the drinking part, I've, like everybody, you've got a Camelback or a bladder bag that you put your drinks in. And I had I think 2.5 liter bag of fluid. So, or 2 liter or 2.5 liter that I had full, obviously, when I start. But I actually had the pipe and I put a piece of wire on the pipe. which I then clicked in next to me. So I don't have to take my hands out of my handles to drink. The pipe is always right here next to me in the air. So drinking was obviously easy, set up like that. And then I obviously just at the halfway mark at 90 kilometers, just made people help refill the drink at a drinking station. And then obviously it's very important your nutrition on an event like that, because I mean, I was cycling, I think just under 8 hours was my total cycle time. So it's a very long day out at a high pace for me. You know, that 23 k's an hour is not taking it easy. It was pushing to the max, if I can put it that way. So obviously eating, I had an eating plan strategy there was quite a couple of 180 turnarounds where I knew I would have to slow down and almost stop to turn around. So at those points, I always, and that was at good points like 10 k's in or 15 k's to the next one. So those were good points where I like, you know, I'm a big fan of power bar, but I mean, any nutrition, but you know, I like power bar stuff and the bars and how it works, etc. So I had power bars and bananas and so on. So at each of those points, I always had like a third of a power bar or a bite of a banana or a power gel, hydrogel. So it was very important on the course to play with your nutrition. And look, the key thing for me was the day I raced was not the first time like I would have trained before. I remember I had like an 8.5 hour ride with a 30-minute push off the bike 2 months before that, or even a bit more than 2 months. And obviously during that you experiment with your nutrition, and you, in that way, before race day comes, you already know exactly how your body reacts with what you eat. And you teach yourself what you need, so that once you get to race day, you have that plan formulated. You know, that's very important, to test the stuff and not do stuff for the first time on race day itself. So, but yes, you know, that was very important. But I think the most important part, which I think few paraplegics and able-bodies would understand, is the cooling down part. Because it was, you know, over 30 degrees, it typically always is in a race like that. You know, to keep your body cool. And with that, I just had to throw water. And when I say throw water, it was like a whole bottle of water, ice water, over my whole body, especially the top of part of my body. So, you know, every water station, etc., I would make sure that they throw me full of water. And there was actually a guy who was racing, you know, with me, who was helping me in the transitions and stuff. So in that first Ironman I raced, they actually allowed him to race behind me. So he also, you know, would help with getting the water over my body every, let's say, 30, 40 minutes. We would like just completely wet my body with water.
Okay.
And that would help keep me cooled down. And I almost want to say that that's the most difficult part, is to make sure you don't lose your temperature, your core temperature, that it heats up too much. Because as long as that stays stable, you know, a lot of other things can stay stable. Your mind stays stable from a quadriplegic perspective, you know. So, but subsequently, I've found a whole bunch of tricks. And the one is that I actually take silk stockings and I put ice blocks in it. And obviously, because I can only feel mostly here around my neck and the top part, so I put that around my neck. So then the ice blocks will melt through the silk stockings, and it's like artificial sweat. And with the wind and that could last me about 45, 50 minutes on a day where the temperature is 35 degrees. So then I can go for 45, 50 minutes and just after that refill with some water, whatever, and then at a turnaround put in some more ice blocks again. So that actually helps quite a lot. So you don't have to stop or have someone on the side of the road that throws you with water to cool you down. So so there was a lot of tricks on the bike to make sure that I get the proper nutrition and you know, keep my core temperature down.
Yeah. And after this long hand cycling part, then there's a part coming where you already know that you are coming faster than the cut down. What is the first impression when you're thinking you are able to be the first one who is going into the last time as a quad? Have you think about this, or this wasn't a thought
Yes.
about?
No, yes, I must say, for me, that was, that's what I'm saying. I think few people realize, and it's sort of sinking in, and only more people realizing it as they hear about it. But I mean, I made history that day. Nobody can ever take away. Records can be broken, times can be broken, but nobody can ever be the first quad to do that. So, no, for me, it was a very big day. So every part that I ticked the box, bike is finished, I made the cutoff. I knew I was one step closer. And, once I had finished the bike, I knew now it's in my hands. And only I can now, how can I say, lose it, if I can put it that way, and not make it. So, for me, to be honest, the scary thing was at that point, when I started the race, it was all about, okay, I broke my arm 6 weeks ago. Let's just try and make the cutoffs and I'll finish it. It wasn't about a time anymore. But when I came in off the bike in such a good place, I thought I'm still on target to go sub 13 hours. So then I was actually still gunning it. And I was gunning it so hard that I took one corner with my racing chair. And those who know about racing chairs, especially us quads sitting very upright, they flip over if you take a 90-degree corner too fast. And I did that and I flipped over. Luckily, it was on the non-arm, the side of my arm that wasn't broken. I mean, it was my right arm that I fell on. But so, after that, I realized, okay, no, let's just forget about at sub 13 or doing this fast. Let's just finish this race without any complications and make sure I finish it, because it was about becoming the first. So no, for sure, it was in my mind the whole time that I can make history. And I mean, I don't know if you have watched that video of the actual race footage, but I mean, the commentators and stuff and the guys who were actually filming the whole race that day for everybody, I think they knew we were onto something special on that day, because there was some amazing footage and commentary. But anyway, yeah, so for me, after I had that crash on the first lap and luckily no punches, etc., I just said, okay, no, calm down, forget about speed. Let's just finish this and become the first to do this. So yeah, it was very special, and I was very aware of what was going to happen. So yeah.
When you have the first, so you made a triathlon before you got injured, right?
Yes.
And right after your injury, you thought you have to do an Ironman again, or you like to do an Ironman?
Yes. So what actually happened, even when I was still in rehab, in 2003, when I was still in rehab, I was already, before my accident, training with a guy called Reinhard Tissink. He's now coaching me. But in the Ironman world, he's been in the top 10 at Kona, at Kona World Champs for the able bodies 3 times. And his best place, I think, is 4th or 5th at Kona. But I mean, he's won many Ironmans across the world. So he's a very good athlete. So I started training with him, and I was actually a very good friend of his before my accident from a training perspective. So I had big dreams of Ironman, but I was still young and still more focused on the Olympic distance, hoping to qualify, planning on trying to chase the dream of going to the Olympics. So still focusing on the shorter distances. So before my accident, I'd only done a half Ironman distance triathlon. But then when my accident happened, while I was in rehab still, this friend of mine, Reinhard, he had obviously at Kona seen, it's a guy by the name Mark Heremans, maybe some of you guys know him, but he was a professional Ironman athlete and then also broke his neck. And then his dream was obviously then to go race at Kona and win Kona as a paraplegic. So he actually spoke with Mark Heremans, because he raced against him before Mark's accident and after, and asked for some tips. But obviously Mark was now paraplegic, so he could only tell him so much. And the biggest advice he gave was just about pressure sores, because he spent a lot of time on the bike and so on. And all these things are very important, pressure sores and those things, positions on the bike, making sure you don't get it. But anyway, so he brought me a video and told me about Mark Heremans and so on, and how he's done an Ironman. And I think for him also, I mean, he didn't understand quadriplegic, paraplegic at that stage and didn't realize how little I did have. But he still planted the seed of maybe I can chase the dream of just doing a triathlon again, an Ironman perhaps after my accident. And already then in rehab, for me, the seed was planted of maybe I can be the first quad to just do a triathlon. And very far in the back of my mind, Ironman. But obviously I knew I had to get independent and out of my parents' hair and all those kind of things first. But the seed was planted. And that's why I'm saying, irrespective of events for us at Paralympics being there or not, I did play wheelchair rugby, but our country as a team would never have qualified, etc. You know, for me, I had a big dream that I was going to chase from almost day one when I was in rehab. So yeah, that's where it was already planted right there.
Yeah, this is for sure
They make it more complicated.
still incredible because
Put it
if
in there.
you're able-bodied, you know you have to train, let's say 20 hours, maybe 14, 15 hours to get to Kona and to finish Kona. So, and they have less time, or they need less time to transfer, to have time between the workouts. They need less time for prepare to the next training session. And the meaning is, when I calculate the hours of training you need and the time you need for recovering to go from A to B, I'm missing maybe 12 hours per day.
Yes. You see, that it's all about being clever about how you do it. But I mean, I have to be honest, it was a team effort. And for me, it was many hours of training. And like you say, I think what people forget is how important recovery, and in Europe, you talk about regeneration of your body, but how important that is, and eating right, not only during training, but after training, sleeping enough, all those things. So to be honest, people talk about being in the zone during a race. For me, I was in the zone for 6 months. Honestly, for 6 months, I was on that journey and nothing was going to stop me. And everything I did, eat, sleep, and I mean, I was still working, but I was working 3/4 days, so 6 hours a day. But even the team I work with at Deloitte, my boss, everybody, they were on the journey with me. So we made it work. But there was a lot of sacrifices. There was no partying. There was no time for anything other than training, sleeping, eating, and the little bit of work I did and focusing on that triathlon. So there is a hell of a lot of sacrifices. And I think that's the part people don't realize. They see you finish this amazing thing, making history, and, you know, almost like the nice parts in the video. What they don't see is everything you had to give up to get there. And, you know, honestly, it is a lot, and it's very difficult to make people understand how much that is. But I think that's the same thing for many professional athletes and athletes who's achieved a lot in life. Is it's very hard to really make people understand the sacrifices to get where you got. But there's a reason why you did get there, you know, so it's true.
Yeah, well said. And the next thing is to do this in, I don't know, maybe I have a wrong picture about South Africa, but when I'm thinking about Germany and South Africa, I have there's a wide range in living conditions and healthy conditions, and then you are able, with your injury height and training in South Africa. So was this a big problem for you to do this in South Africa, or is my picture of South Africa wrong?
Look, I think it depends on what pictures you have of South Africa and where. But you know, some parts of it, yes, it's true. But you know, I am very privileged in terms of where I stay, and you know, I have a car. And look, the roads we have, etc., is not always everywhere great. But that depends on where you live and how it's maintained and so on. So where I live in the city and the outskirts around the city, and most places, it's actually fairly well maintained. But then again, as I say, you get municipalities where that is a challenge. Another thing is, obviously, cars is always a challenge everywhere. Yeah. But in our country, that is a bigger challenge for sure. The taxis and people driving just like they want. So you need to be clever about how and when, what times you go out to train, and so on. So for me, it all depended. Over weekends, there's not a lot of traffic then and so on. And it's easy for me to go out and we drove to very nice places to go out and cycle. but it takes time to get there. But over the weekend, it's okay because there's no traffic. But during the week, it's tough because you can't get out to those nice quiet roads. So I sometimes just had to suck it up, and then I've got like a 3 kilometer, 4 kilometer, very hilly route here close to my house. And if I had to cycle 3-4 hours on that one route for 3-4 hours, then so be it, then I do that. Sometimes I cycled 5 hours, 6 hours on an indoor trainer. I did what I needed to do. And the scary part behind it is cycling so many hours on an indoor trainer. I think sometimes it makes you mentally tougher. But also, I think it's also very good, especially for us quads without the tricep function, to focus on just your technique and circle movement without having to worry about things on the road and so on. So, you know, as sad as it is that you can't always go on the roads everywhere, and depending on where you stay, at the same time, it could be a superpower as well. So yes and no in terms of answering your question. I think you have a little bit of a skewed idea of all the roads and all the things in South Africa, but it also depends on who you speak to, because I'm perhaps just very privileged and blessed. But at the same time, I worked hard. I do work hard to get where I get the salary to be able to do all these things and afford all these things. Yeah. But many people in my country are not as privileged, and I'm sure in other countries the same. So I think, you know, one must always be thankful for what we have, you know, and financially, physically, everything, you know. So because there's always somebody out there that struggles even more. But I think those struggles make you tough. Maybe that's why I'm tough. I don't know. But
yeah, it could be a good reason. And one more point about that. But now I like to change a little bit the topic, and it's more to talk about the training, because in every athlete have power numbers in their mind. Everyone
yes.
is training with power numbers, and I'm working with some of other H1 athletes, and I worked with German athletes earlier at the beginning, and we started to work with power meters, and it's different.
Yes.
So first of all, for sure, the movement, it's more difficult than for some H4 athlete, but as well, the numbers are completely different. And I don't want to talk now about numbers, it's not the point, but I think you know what I mean. The numbers are different.
Yes.
And the question is, how you are you working with power? Are you have a look to power numbers, or do you ignore the power numbers?
Okay, so I mean, obviously you're a coach and understand power numbers, but I always think people need to really make sure they do understand power numbers and how they work, because sometimes they just focus on total power instead of watts per kilogram, and you know, I don't think they always understand what they are getting from the power meter. So first of all, if you do use numbers, make sure you understand it. But then if you use numbers and you're a quadriplegic, make sure you understand the whole scenario. But okay, so I mean, you saw that video of me in the beginning, and I'm a numbers guy, and that's the irony to your question. Now, do I look at these numbers? Yes, I do, but I don't have a power meter on my bike, and I've never had one on my bike. The only way I know about power on the road, I can guesstimate what my power is, but is because I have power on the indoor trainer. And for me, I go on feel, and this is very dangerous, but I think I'm maybe one of the athletes, and maybe because I'm professional, I have trained so many years, etc. But even from before my accident, I was very in touch with my body. And people always talk about, you know, that perceived effort on the day, and what's your effort for the day. And I think I do understand how my body works and what my effort is, and I get that perceived effort right. Because as a quadriplegic, your heart rate, even that, it's not stable on a daily basis. You could have a good day and a bad day in terms of blood pressure, take longer to warm up, a whole bunch of different factors. It takes much longer for our heart rate to really wake up, and really, like in intervals, sometimes it takes me up to 40 minutes before I can now say, okay, now my heart rate is stable when it goes up. in terms of power numbers, I think the power numbers can be stable, but again, you need to make sure you use them in the right way. And again, watts per kilogram with our bikes and so on. It doesn't always translate to the same average speeds between different athletes. So do I use numbers? Yes, but also no. I don't use them while I race. While I race, I race on how hard my body is going. I don't even use heart rate then. I do use heart rate every morning when I wake up. I follow my heart rate, sleeping, etc. Because your resting heart rate can still tell me when I'm sick or when I'm having an off day or I'm not 100%. That's very important for me. I do check my heart rate now here and there on the bike, especially on the indoor trainer. But I've also found I struggle to get my heart rate. Sometimes the heart rate belts for us quads, because it doesn't fit nicely in your chest, there's no muscles, etc. Sometimes the heart rate belts just didn't work nicely. And the newer models, the Bluetooth heart rate belt seems to work better for me. Other quads seem to get it right. I don't know. But anyway, so when I race, I don't really look at my heart rate. But on the indoor trainer, I tend to look at the numbers and those kind of things. And even when I set my indoor trainer, I set it on feel in terms of I feel this is as close a true road feel as what it is. And you can't use the way that the manufacturer tells you to set the wheel on, because I've got a kicker snap. You can't use the way they tell you to calibrate it because it doesn't calibrate correctly. Then it just cycles too heavily. It's not the same then as on the road. So yes, so the numbers thing is I do use it on the indoor trainer. I sort of look at it and it's a gauge of, yes, I'm on form, etc. But when I'm out racing, I tend to focus on how my body feels. I look at cadence and speed and gauge those kind of things. And when I train, like I focus on like how I do on power endurance, on bigger hills, those kind of things. And I test my numbers then, and that's how I know that I'm in form and not in form. But on race day, for me, those numbers are secondary. You know, it's interesting to see them afterwards. But in most cases, as I say, I will never have power numbers on race day because I don't have a power meter right now. And for me, just to spend the money on the power meter just to see what the numbers are for interest at this point, it just doesn't, add up for me. But at the same time, I'm not saying don't get a power meter. I think the power meter is very useful for most coaches, but you need to make sure you understand it and how they work for quads, and make sure you individualize and test the numbers and how it works for that specific person on its own, because it definitely doesn't work the same from one quad to another, because that's just fact. I think it's much easier using the numbers for paraplegics because it's a lot more consistent between athletes, I think.
Yeah, I think there are some good points, what you said. And on the other side, I'm coming from the testing, and I'm doing testing the whole day with all my athletes. And so maybe we have a little bit different approach about this.
Yes,
But,
look, I want to say that's why I'm the first guy to say the testing is important. And but so what I actually do want to say is when you test, normally when you test, you do test on indoor trainers. And that's why for me, on my indoor trainers, I've got numbers, but I don't know if it is 100% accurate versus on the road, but it's always the same on the indoor trainer. So I almost want to say I do testing for myself, but on my indoor trainer, on my settings that I do know. But at the same time, look, me and my coach, we work together and we are comfortable with, we've got certain things that we do check, but I'm with you on the testing. I'm not saying it's not important. I'll be the first guy to say it's very dangerous to do it the way we are doing it unless you really understand your body. And I think that is like 1% of professional athletes that will work like that. So I would definitely rather go with the numbers, do the testing. Even VO2 max testing, you can do it. It's just different for quads. So, I think one just needs to be aware of that. But I think it's very important. And I mean, even if I was coaching athletes, I would want numbers to test, because I don't trust most people to really understand their own perceived effort on the day.
Yeah, sure. And now you are doing H1 hand cycling on the one hand, and on the other side, Ironman. So the one thing is, I think about 10 to 12K as a time trial. in a H1 and 180K on a long distance Ironman.
Yes.
So do you change your training program if you're going more and more to the Paralympics now, for example, next year? Or do you do the whole time, the whole thing, because you're thinking you will do another Ironman in 2 years, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is that first Ironman, it was all about the Ironman. Like I told you, I spent 40 hours on training, but I physically, so that 40 hours, 42 hours would not be 42 hours of training. I think my toughest week, I physically did 35 hours of physical training, but obviously going to and from and getting dressed and getting ready and all those kind of things adds up to hours. And that's where I get to my 40, 42 hours of spending the time on training. But after that, I don't think I've ever had that kind of weeks. And I've done 4 Ironmans now. That kind of training was all to make myself believe, and there were certain sessions I wanted to do, etc. But no, so now definitely when I'm training for Paralympics and those kind of things, you don't have to do those crazy long distance rides, etc. So your training does change. But for me, I always do swimming and wheelchair racing as part of training. But if I like shift, because look, I mean, I've medaled at World Champs for sprints in 2011 in the racing chair, and I do race marathons in the racing chair. I won Berlin Marathon 7 years in a row. You know, I've done many marathons, etc. So, you know, I'm very focused on the racing chair as well. But I keep on doing all of the sports so that when I do shift over to focus on a specific race, that I haven't lost the technique. But for sure, when I'm focusing on like going to the Paralympics, my focus will be cycling, and maybe I'll only do 2 sessions in the racing chair and 2 sessions swimming, just to keep that going. But at the same time, especially the swimming, for me, it's very important because it's good for the range of my shoulders. So it's not just about the sport, it's about keeping my body healthy and injury free. And swimming, if I don't swim, I tighten up, and you know, because of the few muscles that we do have, we actually lose the range in our shoulders. So I always do all the other sports, but for sure we do change like how I train, the distance I train, because obviously training for the Paralympics, it's a lot more, you can try and focus a lot more on speed and holding that speed for a long period of time, for a period of time of 12 to 15 Ks, where for the Ironman, obviously, you do that specific kind of training for a certain speed at a bit of a lower speed, but for 180 Ks, you know. So every kind of race that I do train for, I do specifically, you know, train specifically for that race and interchange. But I will always be doing all 3 sports as cross training, but definitely the focus shifts.
Yeah. And what is your favorite? It is more to prepare you for the Ironman or for the short distance in a hand cycling competition?
Look, I think just because of being a triathlete at heart, I would probably say that's my passion, doing all 3, because I feel you conquer all 3 sports. But you know, for me, Paralympics is a very special event. You know, I've only been there once, and it was for sprints in 2012. There was no other event then. So, and you know, I've been at World Championships and medaled at World Championships in cycling and running, but I've never had the opportunity to race an endurance event at a Paralympics. So, you know, for me, for sure, it's something that I haven't done yet. So for me right now, that would be like my favorite and my focus, if I can put it that way. But if I take a step back and you ask me of all the sports and what to train for, I would definitely say triathlon, and maybe Ironman. It's a lot of effort and a lot of commitment, but a half Ironman, I would say, is a nice distance to still train hard and properly and tough, but without my whole family having to just change their lives to make it fit, you know. So I would say half Ironman. And yeah, you know, just to put the stats out there, I've actually, on my 1/2 Ironman race, I've averaged 27 Ks an hour. On my fastest bike split for the 90 K and a half Ironman is 27. which is also scary because if you think about us quads, for us, even on the 12, 15K time trial, to average 27, 28 on that is pretty much the limit. You know, it's very hard to get to those speeds. And I've managed to do that over 90Ks. And that's the other thing I just want to mention about quadriplegic, paraplegic. There is a little bit of an advantage to having so few muscles. And that is the fact that you can push harder for longer periods of time because it's only so few muscles working. So you can, I almost want to say also training hard and so on, the amount of muscles that needs to recover is less. So even though they work much harder and it's fewer muscles. So I'm not saying we have an advantage because we don't, because there's so many other factors. But I'm just saying it's not all doom and gloom. There's some, points that you need to realize that you can work in your advantage. And at the same time, I think like for endurance events, we can quite possibly hold to our max because we can only push to 120 on our heart rate, etc., and hold that. So the difference between the speed we can hold for a 90K and a 12K time trial maybe is not as big as it would be for a H3 or H4. So it's just another interesting fact.
Absolutely, and it makes things absolutely clear for sure that the range between the speeds or the variance between the speeds are not as high as in an H5 or in an H4 athlete, for sure. And what was your thoughts last year in May when they canceled the Paralympics?
Yeah, look, I mean, it was a necessary evil, but the scary part is, look, I'm sitting here now, I'm going in for a shoulder operation on Friday. Middle August last year, I went to pick up my son in my day chair, 200 meters down the road at his preschool, and I fell badly. And I dislocated my ligaments and my AC joints in my shoulder completely. And I broke the coracoid bone on my scapula completely off. So I've got a hook plate in here now. And, for me, I was super fit during COVID, lockdowns, etc., still preparing for if Paralympics was going to happen. And when they announced it, I carried on training because obviously it's still 1 year later. For me, it was just very sad that you think you need to break your shoulder when you go 80 km an hour down a downhill on your bike and not while picking up your son at school. But I would have been in Tokyo at that point in time already when it happened. So look, for me, my thoughts was it was very sad, but it's 1 year on. Then that happened, and I wasn't even sure whether I'd be able to. I was worried about my daily living in terms of how my shoulder can recover because it's a very big injury. And I'm still struggling in the swim and the racing chair, but the plate is coming out on Friday and I'm already 95% worth the plate in on where I was just before I broke it. So, for me, Paralympics is still a big reality, but sitting here today, what was my thoughts in May? My thoughts was, cool, Paralympics is still going to happen 1 year later. Now I'm sitting here, and although my federation said they did meet with all the organizations, etc., earlier this month, in January month, and it's going ahead, I'm still having my doubts about whether it's actually going to happen, which is very sad for me. So first of all, it was sad, but there was still hope because I thought, hey, it's just 1 year later and it'll definitely happen. Now, when I speak with people in the know and in the background, I'm worried about whether it actually is definitely going to happen, and for me, I just really hope it does. Because at the same time, we've spoken about it many things, but I've got a degenerative eye disease, which is something few people know. But to be honest, if I get tested now for my eyes, they will probably already put me in a blind class. That's how bad my eyesight is. I'm struggling to not want to drive anymore. I'm going colorblind. When I go from sun into shade, I can't see in the shade. I sometimes have to guess where I'm cycling and where I'm driving. I have to be very careful. So, Tokyo for me, I think is probably my last chance already with my eyesight so bad to really race competitively. So for me, how can I say it? it was already bad last year because it means it's 1 year of my eyes getting worse. Now I'm like, this is probably my last go at a Paralympics, because after this, I don't know if my eyesight will be good enough to race competitively anymore, because I'm already taking a lot of risk, if I can put it that way.
Oh, I
So,
didn't
yeah.
know this.
Yes, few people do know, and to be honest, it's already an impairment for me while I'm racing. So I actually go and study courses, all marathons and courses I do. I know at what kilometer, what turn is left, right, etc. I go drive the course many times in different light conditions to make sure when I have to guess where I'm going, that I know where I'm going. And the luck for me is when you race, the roads are open. So I'm actually feeling more comfortable when I race than when I have to train. And that's why I actually do like to often just train on roads that I know so well from all the years, because then I can focus on what's on the road and not where I'm going. So. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm really, for sure, for all my athletes, but for you as well, I'm crossing my fingers that we will have Tokyo 2021 and that you are able to participate. So good luck for you.
No, thanks a lot.
For everyone, for sure, who like to go to the Paralympics. And when you're saying this, are you thinking and hope or believing you will do another Ironman in the next few years?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I've been trying to get into do Kona for many years now. And they just keep saying, yeah, I have to qualify with a slot because there is a hand cycle slot. But then to qualify with the hand cycle slot, I have to go and race and beat Jetsi Plat at a race. And I mean, that's not going to happen. So the thing is just that they don't get the difference of quad, and then there's a whole bunch of other things as well. So I think in some senses, sometimes I'm a bit disappointed in Ironman, the brand, because I think they've lost what it's all about sometimes. But at the same time, I'll keep fighting and try and get my go at Kona. But yes, for me, it's been a race against time with my eyesight, and now it's really becoming a reality. But to be honest, for Kona, I'm anyway going to be have to push at nighttime, and I can already not see anything at nighttime. So I'll already have to make some plans. But luckily, in the racing chair, you can go at walk speed and still make the cutoff probably then if you made the bike cutoff. But I definitely still want to go do some Ironmans. And honestly, if I have to go do it with an eyesight problem, with technology these days, maybe I can have somebody who with a remote control can control where I'm going, and I can still be doing it on my own cycling, and they just steer my bike for me or whatever. But I will make a plan if I have to, if I still want to do it and my family allows me to. As I say, my son is now on his way to be 4 years old, so I don't know, life happens and we'll see. But I definitely still have some plans and dreams in that respect. And at the same time, luckily with my eyesight, I do want to maybe take on the English Channel, swim the English Channel as well, maybe one day. But again, we'll see what happens there. But with my eyesight, that can still happen because I'm anyway on my back, and I will still need somebody to just, guide me on the swim. So that can be a normal thing for me, even if I do go blind completely. So. Yeah. But yeah, still many plans. But for now, Paralympics.
Yeah, hopefully. So at this moment, I like to give the others a chance to ask you some questions. So I make a lot of questions already, 1 hour long now. Maybe the others have some questions, and we will see. So I open the table for everyone who would like to ask Pieter some questions.
Hey, what's up, Pieter? I have a question for you.
Good to see you, Ricardo.
Hey, good to see you too, Ralph. So you mentioned that. I also think about it this way when you say that us as like paraplegics, and in your case quadriplegics, we only use one. The muscular group that we use is slightly. Of course, it's like different from other athletes, and we only use that muscular group. and you say like we can benefit from that by doing a lot of work without like exerting too much energy, if that's what I understand, right? But when you say like there's like few muscles to recover, but I also think like what's your take on like if you're a triathlete, you're only using those muscles, so you're also doing like an excess fatigue on that muscular group.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so like
Yeah, so
go ahead.
no, so I mean, you can finish your question.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much so like how do you handle like your recovery when you're doing, of course, like you're even using less muscles that for
Yes.
example, I myself as a T5 work with.
Look, I think first of all, it's very important. I say that, but I think that's where a lot of coaches will be. Oh, be careful what you're saying here, because you have to understand it's not just as simple as that, and you have to build into it. We have less muscles, and you have to use that same muscles in every single part of the sport. So you have to be careful of overdoing it, getting injuries, those kind of things. So that's why you really have to be in tune with your body. But at the same time, let's talk about you as a paraplegic. There's a reason why you can look like a bodybuilder almost in your arms and do the endurance sports, but you won't find a triathlete or a runner that looks that bulky because it will be excessive muscle. So at the same time, if you train hard and you build up into it, all I'm saying is you can be clever and use having fewer muscles in a sense to your advantage. But you have to test your own limits and play with it and build into it slowly. And again, if you do it with a coach, they will typically be clever on how you do it. But it's important to understand that your body does work differently. In terms of recovery, how do you do it? So look, I mean, it's very similar to any able-bodied athlete in the end. You still have to, when you train, first of all, nutrition while training, but then also eating the right stuff after training. And perhaps, if you're doing a lot of training, for me, the most important part of recovery is sleep. Sleep enough. And if you can sneak in like a 45 minute, 1 hour sleep in between, if you're doing 2 training sessions, or I did sometimes 3 training sessions a day, etc. If you can sneak in, a good like power nap in between during the day and make sure you sleep 8 hours at night solidly, I think that's already half of the job done. But then also monitoring how your body, is recovering over building blocks and pushing the training and building up towards pushing it to the limit, if I can put it that way. So obviously being in tune with your body, building up cleverly and making sure you sleep and eat, etc., and making sure that your body does recover in such a way that when you do your quality sessions, that you can do them properly. But all those principles, I think, can be drawn parallel over any sports from able-bodied to us. It's just for you and me with our different muscle groups. I think in a certain sense, I can do a lot more hard training sessions and recover sufficiently to do another one the next day, versus maybe what you do because you have more muscles that need to recover. But as I say, there's a balance between that as well. It's not in a straight line. I've got half of your muscles, so I can do double what you do. It doesn't work like that, and it doesn't work like that for different athletes. Some people have the same amount of muscles and they can only train a certain amount of quality versus others, so it's important to understand the principles of training. If you have a coach, work with the coach, communicate and all those kind of things properly, and make sure you don't overdo it. Because I always say the regeneration or the recovery is the most important part of any program. If you don't recover, you can't train. So you need to make sure that whatever you do, your recovery works with it and your body is recovered, and that you do the quality sessions in quality, and that you get out of the session what you have to.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
Nikki, that means that you are not going every night for a celebration, and you have to go early to bed and not make 5 hour or 4 hours nights every night.
Exactly. Sacrifices.
That takes all the fun away.
Different folks, different strokes. Eh?
No,
Okay,
I agree. And do you use any I don't know if you're familiar with this new this like a waist like a wristband that measures your like how good like your body's recovered. I think it's called Whoop.
Yes,
Uses like your HRV and a bunch of
yes.
algorithms.
Look, I mean, I've got a Garmin 40935 that pretty much, I mean, has that daily measurements of everything. And I know the new watches have a whole bunch of other stuff. But for me, I really my heart rate for me, I don't care what you say about watt meters, whatever, but any training, I feel your heart rate is the most important part. It can be combined with watt meters, can be combined with anything. But even for recovery, for me, my heart rate, if I'm a little bit off, my heart rate's up. If I'm too tired, my heart rate's up. It's just fact. And the thing is, it's not about knowing that 60 is high and 50 is low. It could be for this week, on average, you are sitting on a 50 and then high as a 60. But for another week, on average, I could be sitting on a 40 and then a high as a 50. So it's a continuously monitoring where your heart rate is during that week, watching the heart rate over time. So yes, I do wear that stuff, but I don't focus on too many metrics other than my heart rate. My heart rate really is for me a very key indicator. And obviously not just that, how I feel, so I'm in tune with my body. So how I feel when I wake up, because sometimes your body is healthy and your mind isn't. And that, I think that's something that doesn't get touched a lot on these, on many, by many coaches or by many people. They forget to talk about your mental health. And sometimes your body isn't even tired, but you're just so hurtful in your mind. And that's also not good. So you need to be sure that both of those things are good.
Yes, of course. And how long have you been an athlete? Like, how long have you been monitoring your heart rate, for example, as an athlete?
Look, I mean, I was sort of semi-professional before my accident already. So before my accident, and I got a heart rate monitor in 1999 or 2000. And I was my accident in 2003. So then I was still learning, but I think by 2003, I was starting to understand the heart rate. But it was a whole new ballgame when I became a quadriplegic. But yeah, look, from when I was, then there wasn't the monitoring like on your wrist and it's the whole time. So you actually had to have a wrist strap on your chest or measure your heart rate when you wake up. So it was a bit different. So I would say I wasn't as accurately monitoring as these days, but these days with the technology we have, I'd say for the last, probably almost 19 years, I've been monitoring on a daily basis perfectly, with my watch. But before that, I would at least know, like, I would say 5 out of 7 days, I didn't take my heart rate when I woke up.
Wow. Well, then you are pretty familiar with your body. I mean, that's incredible that you've been doing that consistently throughout 19 years. That's great.
Look, and I mean, the other thing is also about your body. I talk about heart rate now, but for us squads, but even for Paris, what you eat, the reaction with your body, like for us, about your stomach and your bladder and not getting dyslexia and I mean, all that kind of stuff. There's just, it intensified when I broke my neck because you had to learn what you eat, what the reaction is with your body. And I mean, even for me as a quadriplegic, we don't even talk about that, but it's very important for me to time how I eat and not having my stomach completely empty on race day. If my stomach goes on the morning of race day, then I'm flat because my blood pressure is too low. So my stomach, I tend to make sure that my stomach will go the day before the race. Just so that it's not too full, but also not too empty. And then I just tend to have a much better race where I feel mentally cool. I'm not going to have an accident and have a mess in my clothes. But at the same time, my blood pressure is just better. So it's stupid things like that. But it's actually that kind of stuff also that's so important to understand how your body works for us as paras and quads with that kind of stuff. And it's different for all of us.
Yeah, I completely agree. I couldn't agree more with you. I think for me, I'm like everything I do has a big impact on my heart rate, as you say. Like, if I stop in the middle of a ride and I have even if it's a small meal, I can see my heart rate being up by 10 or 15 beeps because of the digestion process. Like I could be pushing the same watts, but my heart rate will be significantly higher, and then it will drop again. But like it will take quite a while for me on the bike to get it back to what it was before I ingested anything on my body. It even could be fluids too, which is kind of hard to believe. But even when I'm drinking water, my heart rate will spike up.
Okay. I mean, it's that kind of things that it doesn't mean when it spikes up something is wrong, as long as you know it's like that. But whether it, has an impact on your performance, that's our different story. Maybe it doesn't have an impact, maybe it does. And it's that kind of stuff that's actually very important for every person to figure out. And it's that kind of stuff, I think, which is so much harder for us as paras and quads versus able bodies. Even though for able bodies, it's also important. But for us, I think those kind of things have so much more of an impact. And it's really important to understand that and learn how your body reacts to these things and use it to your advantage, the best of your ability, and know what is the best way of getting yourself ready for a race or in a race, how to deal with these things. So
very good answers. So there are, I hope, some different questions as well from others. Come on, guys. Oh, Luke, come on. Good to see you again.
Hey, Ralph. Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to thank you for setting a benchmark for quads when it comes to Ironman. I was going to ask if you follow any able-bodied sports. I'm guessing you follow Kona and things like that, triathlon with able-bodied. And if you do you have like a standout athlete? Sorry if it's a bit of a random question. It's nothing to do with disability.
No.
But
yes, so look, I follow many able-bodied sports. And I've got a couple of heroes, and it might be surprising who they are. But so first of all, Reinhard Tissink, my coach, the guy I spoke about, for me, he's a standout athlete, but because I know a little bit more about his life and his background and how he used to train as an able body, what he did, but also how he lived his life with his family and in South Africa and in the sport of triathlon, actually made a living out of it, was for me very inspirational. But I mean, then I've got guys I've met. I've been at the Laureus World Sport Awards. I was nominated for Laureus in 2016. And I was actually a big fan of David Rudisha, 800 meter runner. And I actually met him there. But yeah, just his professionalism, how him and his coach, approach the things and so on. For me, he's a standout athlete. And then a guy like Usain Bolt, believe it or not, I think I've got a lot of respect for him in terms of, again, just being a champion and delivering when it counts. He always did. So he's a standout athlete. But then in the sport of triathlon and cycling, I mean, I've got standout guys. I must say, I've got many guys who are really great, but, it's still Jan Frodeno. He's a German, but he's also got some South African background. But, for me, he's also a very impressive guy.
I'm not sure what the meaning is. He is from German. What is the bad?
He was born in South
Can you
Africa.
explain it to me, please, again, Peter? I thought very friendly to you.
No, he was born in South Africa, actually. So he's got some South African roots, if I could put it that way. But he's solid German. I'll give you that.
Yeah,
I think he's a great guy.
Absolutely. He's someone like you in a able-bodied sport who set a lot of new benchmarks, and yes. He's incredible. Absolutely. Yeah.
But I mean, there's many. I can mention many in other sports, rugby, cricket, etc. Luke, but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
yeah, definitely. So I'm guessing it's quite important for you to. You tend to look up to people who are champions, not only in the sport they do, but off outside of sport. I'm guessing Usain Bolt is is a great guy and he's a great role model also, as I'm sure your friends coaches.
Yes, I think that's the important thing for me. You've hit it on the nail. You know, I don't just look at the champion. That stuff counts, and take nothing away from it. But for me, it's about the person and who he is off the field as well. And as I said, a lot of times people looking from the side, so they see the glamour and that guy's the champion, but they forget to look in the background what that guy's life is really about and the sacrifices it made. So for sure, you know, those are the true things that I really look at when I look at somebody that I look up to, you know. So, and I mean, even a guy like Roger Federer, I don't even mention him, but I have to just put an interesting fact out here. So my wife, her mother, so my mother-in-law and Roger's mother, Roger Federer's mother, they are cousins. So I'm actually quite closely related by marriage to Roger Federer. Just putting it out there, but he's also a standout guy.
Yeah, not bad. Some other questions out there.
Hi.
Well, Ed, cool to see you. What is your question?
It's not a serious one, but it's also a serious one. But first, thank you for sharing your story with us. My question is, if you could be a pirate or a ninja, which one would you be and why?
Interesting question. I think there are good pirates in the world, but I've always been a big ninja fan. So I would probably be a ninja. And I think probably because of the precision and yeah, I just think they can kick a pirate's ass, to be honest. So don't know if that answers the question. I quite like winning. So I think a ninja would kick a pirate's ass.
It does, thank you.
Cool answer. Another question, please.
Peter, where are you from? Where do you live?
So I live in Johannesburg in South Africa. I was born and raised in Joburg. So yeah, this is where I live.
And
but
how
obviously,
is it for training over there, like especially for hand cycling? Like, are there any good roads where you can just go and not worry about cars
Yes.
and shit like that?
Yes. So look, where I live, luckily I lived in what's called the Boomdorf area. So like I said, I've got some laps here, short ones, but where I can train on the roads quite safely, but it's very short laps then. Like I think my longest lap in here will be like a 4K, 5K lap, but it's better than nothing if you only have that. But in Joburg, there is quite a lot of, I say a lot, there's a couple of places where you can go to, but from my house, I'll have to drive there. And it's probably about 30 kilometers away, but where there's really super cool, nice roads just for cyclists. When I say just for cyclists, it's an open road and it's got a cyclist bike path, but like on a Saturday and a Sunday over the weekend, where I go to is a place called the Cradle, and you can have like a loop, it's a round loop with in and outs where you can probably get about 60 kilometers, where there is almost, I don't know, it looks like a Tour de France every weekend. It's just cyclists and cyclist able bodies, and it's got a nice little side bike path. But everybody knows all the cyclists goes there, and there's tons of cyclists over weekend, so it's very safe to go there. So that's quite a cool place to go to. But unfortunately, it's not like, you know, I've been overseas to many places, and there's definitely overseas, you know, a lot of nicer, if I can put it, safer roads, bike paths on the side of the road and so on. We don't always have that, unfortunately not. But that being said, you know, I've also been overseas and seeing our guys cycle on these narrow roads with no side lane. And it's just maybe the perspective is that in Europe, guys look more for cyclists, look out for them more. But I felt a lot less safe on that road with cars looking out for me versus being on my road where there's a little bit of a yellow line on a side road. So it depends, but yeah, there's not many of those super nice bike paths. But in Joburg and Cape Town, all the main cities, you'll probably find some places where there is actually some roads that actually is really decent for training.
All right.
Cool. I have another question for you, Peter, and maybe it's a little bit, it's not a little bit, it's a difficult question. And it's about H1 classification and the development over the last 10 years in this class. I think there have been a lot of changes, and in my eyes, it's so as a background, in my eyes, it's one of the biggest group of athletes in the world for SCI.
Yes.
So the most people have a very high injury. So, but it's the smallest group in hand cycling.
Yes.
So it's difficult about the classification. Yeah,
Yes.
as few centimeters, only a half centimeter can mean big changes.
Yes.
So,
So I think I get where your question's coming from, and I'm the first guy who would honestly stand up, and that's why I say I don't mind getting classified 20 times. I am who I am, so they must classify me, and if they make the rule that that is the muscles you're allowed to have, then I must stick to it. And the sad part about it, I think, which you are touching on, is that I think our class, especially the H1, is the class that needs the sport the most, because we already have so few sports we can just plug in. I mean, if you talk about blade runners, they can decide hand cycle or normal bike. They can go and participate with able-bodied guys in able-bodied events. Us H1s, there's so few events that we can already just participate in. And a lot of guys aren't super athletes, so it's already just hard living life on a daily basis. And I think in general, my opinion on parasports from the IPC is that they are not looking after the classes, and it's more and more happening that a higher class just drops down to a lower class, and then they start winning everything. And unfortunately, the H1 is always right at the bottom, so we'll always get, guys that could possibly go wrong. And in the athletics, in the T51 class, they completely messed it up again, just as it just got opened up again. Where I think in the H1 class, we tried to keep it fairly clean, and we managed to do so. But my honest opinion is in the last 3 years, there's especially 2 guys, and the rest of the H1s in the class are actually fighting it, but who is in the class, and I don't think they're supposed to be there. And there's clear things on how it's happened, and when you look at the proper function, which I believe is not right. But I mean, we can go into that, and it could be politics, whatever. But the point being, I think they're missing a trick with classification. They're not sticking to their rules, and classifiers don't even, they do a bench test and that's it. They don't even do look at athletes when they race. You can't protest anymore, so you can't protect the class. And I honestly think that you should be focused a lot more on his function on a daily basis, on what he can do and those kind of things, because those are the real indicators of what the function they actually really have. So there's a lot of, I think, cheating going on sometimes. Sometimes it's not cheating, and just classifiers, I think, not educated enough in the different spinal cord injuries. But I don't think the H1 class has been, and I speak H1, but I think in many of the other classes, I don't think it's protected, and I don't think the classification, there's work to be done. And I know that they've now done all these new research and so on. But when I look at that research, the focus is a lot more on the higher classes and not on H1 specifically. And even the H2s is such a wide class, but then you shouldn't push the guys that's weaker in the H2 down into H1, because then you're going to kill the class for the guys who really need it. And I mean, even myself, believe it or not, I do not have 3 for triceps. On my right side, you might call it a 3 minus, but it's not a full 3. And on my left, it's a 2, and you're allowed to have 3s. And even having full 3s gives you so big advantage. And now they're starting to push guys with a slight 4 or 3 plus, but more than a 3 into a class. And they're putting in guys who's not spinal cord injuries. And, it becomes a debate, and it becomes very difficult. So, I mean, my answer can be even longer. I don't want to speak for hours on this, but I do think there's a lot of work to be done. And I do feel that they need to focus more on the lower classes versus the higher classes because we need it more. And I almost, like I say, feel they need guys, especially cycling is such an amazing sport. You can do it on an indoor trainer. It's accessible, it's easy. The H1s needs this sport to continue. But if they carry on doing what is looking like it's happening now, I think they're going to kill the sport again, and the numbers are going to be even less again.
I think there are very good points you said and mentioned. And what I'm thinking is I'm working now with hand cyclists since 17 years. And for me, the question is if, for sure, the classification should be always under the view of the newest researches and the development of athletes. On the other side, my question is, and I'm always thinking, is it maybe a necessary, or is maybe the choice of the course as well much more important, because we have these athletes in the H1 class which have not all the function like the best H1 athletes. If you have a good course, they may able to participate. But if you're doing in a hand cycling race, the same courses between H5 to H1, there's already a problem, because some of the H1 athletes will never be able to participate because of the course.
Yes. So I think that's where you need to draw the line between maybe going to a World Cup and a World Champs versus just general events. And again, I think the key thing is for people to understand the disability, because I absolutely agree with you. There are some more C5, 6 kind of quads, C5 quads, and they are H1. They will never win, but they will also not go to a course that's so crazy that they can't participate, because they know they're not going to enjoy it. They're going to be so slow. It's too yellow. It's too this, too that. So I agree with you. I think they need to look at that. I don't mind if they make it an easier course at a World Cup, but I do understand that sometimes it's hard because of the range of disabilities to do it at a race like that. But I think they need to start realizing more and more the differences and cater more and more for it. Because I mean, there's that same argument for T1 versus T2. You know, where it's also the course just becomes too difficult for a T1 versus a T2, but they have to do the same course. So I absolutely agree with you. And you want to grow the sport from the bottom up. Like I said, I agree with that, because those are the guys that need it. And you're not going to grow it if you do the difficult courses. And that's where I also agree with you. World Cups, anybody can enter. So that's often in Europe and so on, where a lot of guys would want to participate and race against the best, but they won't come out if the course is too difficult. So how do you grow it? Make sure the course is made for everyone.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, but at the same time, I do understand that it's difficult, and one might take the argument from the professional side to say, but hey, this is a World Cup. So if you're not going to be able to do that course or race it, then it's okay because it's a World Cup. This is for professional athletes. But there's so few events that to grow the sport, they need to understand that the World Cup is where the attraction lies, and maybe where the guy's hero is. I'm not saying I'm somebody's hero or H1's hero, but maybe you see me do an Ironman and geez, he would want to come and race at that World Cup, but then he sees the course and then he won't come. And he'll never learn. And maybe if he did come out and it was a decent course, he'll understand and learn and be so inspired that maybe one day he actually will be able to do those courses. You know, so
Yeah.
so I agree with you. You know, they have to look at it from both angles, and what is the best for the growth of the sport, and the type of course, and sticking to your rules with classification is very, very important for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for sure, in my eyes, it's would be good for the sport if we have always different courses for the time trial and road race as well. Because it's
Yes.
like if you're going to one World Cup and if you're good in climbing, then you both racings maybe win. If you're not a good climber and you need a flat course, it's always a little bit like not boring, but it's predictable.
Yes.
And this is
But at the
boring.
same time, I hear what you're saying. If you do that, you have a flat and a yearly course, and whether which one is road race or time trial, at least then for the weaker H1s, for instance, then it would still draw them for at least one event because they know the course of one event they can do.
Yes.
Never mind the boring flat course versus yearly course or whatever, and the variation that is nice.
Yeah.
I think in that way they can cater for those kind of athletes as well. You know, so I absolutely agree with you.
Well, I know always in para sport, the classification is a big problem. And the one reason for sure is that the medals and the Paralympic Games have a limit. So it's not possible to make very fair classification because of the amount of
Yes.
medals. But
Agreed.
I totally agree that, especially because I have an overview in hand cycling, it will be nice if they will work on new rules for the classification in
Yes.
cycling.
But to be honest, for me, even I mean, that's also it's always like you said, a difficult topic. At the same time, you know, before there was any Paralympics, there was no sports and there was no medals. So it's so cool that there is that stuff and that we do have the heroes. And the fact is you can never cater for all the disabilities. So if you have a disability and you fall in the bottom of the class and the weaker part of the class, then it's just tough luck for you. You know, that's just life. You know, life isn't fair. But the key point for me is I feel that you should be able to in some way find a sport where you can be semi-competitive. It might not be your favorite sport that you would have wanted it to be in, but there should be a sport that you can find yourself fairly competitive at least. But even with that being said, the most important part for me is that if there is rules, they must stick to the rules. So it doesn't matter then, you know, for me, at least then you know if you're weak in the class, you're weak in the class and so be it, but you know they stick to the rules. But if there's rules and then they bend the rules for one guy or another guy or this, that, then it starts becoming ugly. And, you know, I think for classes like a H1 class, it's so clear cut. And like a H3 class, I think it's so clear cut. Even H4, you know, from H5 to H4, I mean, there's all these debates now happening, guys from H5 now racing H4 and this, that, and they could just stick to the rules, you know, and then it would have been a much easier concept. But even that I know becomes a difficult thing because there's not just spinal cord injuries, there's other disabilities, etc. But, you know, I sometimes feel they move so far from the rules when it's so simple. And the only class where I feel it's not that simple is H2. I think that's a very, very difficult wide class. But for all the rest, I think sometimes it's so simple, but they don't stick to the rules. And I just don't think they, you know, I might be stepping on some classifiers' toes, but I sometimes feel they either not educated enough or either just not focused enough on specific disabilities and classes and applying the rules and how to apply the rules. And like I said, I just don't understand why classifiers don't really, after they did the bench stage, go look at the actual racing and go look how the guy transfers in and out of his bike and lives his life, you know, for the first 3 years before he gets confirmed and so on. Because that's clear indicators normally of being in the right class, you know, so. But it's a work in progress. It won't ever be perfect. And I think we need to accept that and be thankful for the fact that there is actually so many sports and that it already is at that level. So one needs to be happy with that. But at the same time, you still need to push to get it correct and you know, refine it to the best that we can as we go on, you know.
Yeah, but for that, I'm very happy that you're here because with your achievements of the last years, you can give a good example for all the H1 athletes all over the world what is possible. So this is really incredible what you did the last 15 years. So
Thank you
thanks
very
for
much.
that. And are there any other questions in the room? Because now we are more than 90 minutes and I asked him only for 90 minutes maximum. So
It's okay.
Who's going to
I
win the
see Rob
Super
Zimley is
Bowl?
here as well. The Gators. I don't know if that's even remotely close, but or will it be the Cowboys, the Texans? I don't know. I can't answer that.
So, Ralph, if it's okay for me to ask another question,
Sure. The others don't not like to ask questions.
it must be a British thing.
Yeah.
So, just quickly, I'd be interested to know what other Paralympic sport excites you. So, for instance, if you could choose to compete in any Paralympic sport, regardless of classification, which one excites you? So, for instance, you could compete against, have the same disability as Jetse Platt and go at it with him in the H4 class. Does that make sense?
Yes. Look, for me, I'm a competitor. And on the day, and that's why this classification sometimes really ticks me off. Because before my accident, I would also on the day want to be on the race line. And if a guy beats me because he's better than me, then well done to him, you know. So from that perspective, first of all, I would have liked to at least be at the top of classes, because then I feel there's no excuses. And there's no, this guy's got that, that guy's got this. It's the true form of competitiveness, and everybody's got maybe not the same ability, but we're in the highest class there can be, so no excuses, and whoever's best on the day is best on the day. So from that perspective, yes, I would have loved for all classes to be like that, if that sort of helps the question. But then in terms of what sports I would compete in, look, because I was swimming, cycling, running, triathlon before my accident, it will probably stick to those sports that I am already doing, except that unfortunately there is no triathlon class for quadriplegics. So triathlon is my passion. So I would have loved to be able to race competitively in triathlon specifically. And, you know, I am sort of pioneering triathlon, but I find it very hard to see that any H1, T51 kind of class, there might be a quad class that happens maybe in the future, not the near future, but a quad class for our level, at least, I can't imagine that happening very soon because of, you know, just being so hard to do triathlons to start off with, and it's 3 sports and the effort and so on. But I would definitely have liked to have raced triathlon against guys in my own ability. But that being said, I've in most Ironmans and half Ironmans had some paras that wasn't necessarily professional athletes, so I've had some good races against them, which is still fun. But it's just more for myself. So all the other, I mean, there's many other cool sports. I just have to say, you know, I've enjoyed athletics. I enjoy wheelchair rugby, basketball, and it's all cool stuff. But yeah, it's just my heart before and after my accident will be swimming, cycling, running, and triathlon.
So
okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, doesn't seems like that. Then Peter, it was a really exciting session, and it was fun to listen to you. And you, like I said, more than one time today, what you have done in the last 10-15 years was a big thing for the parasite or for the para sports. So I cross my fingers that you are able to go for racing the next 20 years as well, and able to participate at the Paralympics this year as well. And a lot of thanks for being here and being a part of this camp. Thank you for everything.
No, huge pleasure, guys. It was a privilege, and good luck to all you guys. I'm sure you guys have your big dreams to chase down, and yeah, if you work hard at it, just keep going at it, step at a time, and before you open your eyes, you might have broken through the barriers that you never thought was possible.
Cool. So we are coming to the end. It's 5 minutes to go, and then our training session comes to the end. Then we have done the second day of our camp, an easy spin. Tomorrow we have a strength endurance training session, which is fun as well. And we have another guest, and the guest for tomorrow will be an American. So it will be interesting to see who is coming tomorrow. Is at this moment any question to the schedule or any question about yesterday to me at this moment? Oh, that's cool. Then, Jody, do you have anything to say?
I just wanted to acknowledge that for the U.S. athletes that are military veterans, that I can reimburse you your USA cycling license cost. But I would have to send you an email that would have a link, not a link, but an attachment that would be an electronics fund transfer as well that would need to be completed. That one page and would need to be scanned and submitted via email to me, and it must include also your receipt from USA Cycling that shows the payment that was made. That's something I'd like to wrap up this month. So if it's, and people should know if they're planning on racing in Huntsville, they will indeed need a license, even if it's only a day license. That's all.
Pretty cool. So one more note for the Friday session. I have seen that today are some athletes here with us which haven't been yesterday with us. So on Friday, we are doing the 20 minutes time trial. And if you have a testing kit at home, you are more than welcome to test you on Friday. So taking blood samples before and after the 20 minutes TT. And if you have question how often and when you have to take blood samples, you can ask me at this moment right now.
Hi.
Yes, Velat.
Would it be the same as last time?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Is there any particular reason I'm not doing the TT, or was that just because the elevation thing, or?
So we are in a completely different situation at this moment with your training schedule. But if you like to do it, we can adjust your schedule and you can do the 20 minutes time trial as well. But in that moment, I don't think you have a testing kit at your place.
Nope, not really.
And then I would prefer to proceed with the
Okay, that's cool. With the regular schedule that I got, that's fine with me.
Other questions? For sure.
Ralph, I've got a question. This is Holly. I was wondering, you know, like Peter was saying that he got in race mode like 6 months out to prepare for a race. Is there like a time limit as far, I mean, you can't always be in race mode. You're going to have to back off. Is there like a time limit or recommendation that you should set your goals for and then back off from there?
Oh, that's a very difficult question and a good question for sure. So for sure, his exemplation or his mode was because he had to do the Ironman, right? So to do 3.8K, 100K for the cycling, and then a marathon with the racing chair. So, and he thought that he had to be in the race mood for 6 months. And this is completely different. It's not possible to say someone have to be 6 months in a race mood, someone have to be a year in a race mood. And it's more a question, I think, what he's saying, it's about organization, so that you live your life for this specially goal. So it's not necessary that you're in a mood like being in a race mood for 6 months. This could be difficult because then you may burn out earlier than after, or you don't reach the 6 months at the end because you're burnt out. And so it's a difficult question, and I think it's necessary to have some moments where you can relax, but still have this organization of 40 hours of training in the week. Yeah, so it's more the question of two different points. On the one side, your mood, your situation, what you're thinking about, or if you're only thinking on the specific point, and on the other side, how you organize your life. And for example, for the Paralympics, I try to bring my athletes for the daily structure since October, November to go the way to the Paralympics. But for sure, they have still moments where they are maybe drink a beer or drink a red wine. Yeah, so it's sometimes difficult to say exactly what is the meaning of this race mood or mode. Yeah. So Luke, you like to ask one more question?
Yeah, so I've just recently started following NBA, and I've got a bet with a friend of mine who's going to be Rookie of the Year. So I'm interested if you guys have got a bit of an outsider tip. Anybody?
Out.
Looks like everyone's pretty focused on cycling.
Yeah, no worries.
So who are you going with?
Well, I've got Cole Anthony with the Orlando Magic, but I don't know. We're doing the bet tomorrow, so we're going to finalize it tomorrow and kind of. But I was just wondering if you guys have got any sort of outsiders who you think would be a bit of a good tip.
How about the younger ball kid? I don't know his first name.
Leon Ball or something, I think you're on about. Yeah.
LaMelo Ball.
Orange Jello ball.
LaMelo.
Okay. Any other question about hand cycling or so? If not, I will leave the room and you can talk about NBA rookies, and I'm out about that topic.
Well, we can talk about American cycling, paracycling. So Will and I have a group call with Tour of America's Dairyland. So they've got a date picked out, and it's late June. But I'm going to tell you, one of the things that are going to be dependent on all this happening is the cities wanting the events to be there, to provide the venue and to provide the subsidies to the race organizer. So if we're able to pull it off, there'll be 4. It'll be a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday race. and these are criterium races. And, you know, it's as good as it gets for American cycling if you can do a criterium. And we, in the past, I guess we've done it 3 years now. The prize money has been very fair, and that's a good thing. You know, solid, and the spectators are wonderful. But we don't know how spectators can be with this COVID thing. So the main thing is can it be pulled off? And if you don't have the spectators, then the cities probably don't want to have the draw. Another reason they could have not wanting the draw or the event is to protect their citizens. So there's a lot of things up in the air, and it could be that this is planned for the next few weeks to happen and then it not happen, say 4 weeks out. But we're optimistic. And if we're able to pull it off, Ralph, then maybe we could do some testing as well in mid-June.
The date, please, again.
Yeah, it's late June. I'm probably speaking too much on it right now because we're supposed to have a big meeting next week about it.
Because when is the tryouts for the Paralympics
It's the weekend after that is towed, because it was going to be the same weekend and they moved the date because of the tryouts, Paralympic trials.
So the first is the tryouts and the week after is the...
The trials would end presumably on Sunday and the competition in Milwaukee would be Thursday.
Okay. So 2 weeks after the World Champions in Portugal.
I guess so. I don't have my calendar out. I guess I could pull it out here, but this is all just penciled in. Let's see, June.
Yeah,
so
that's correct.
Toads 24, 25, 26, 27.
Okay. Yeah. So if I'm looking to my time schedule, I'm able to come 2 days earlier so we can testing after the racings.
You're talking about the Milwaukee, or you're talking about the or Minneapolis? Which race afterwards?
So the 3-4 days racings, crits.
After that?
Yes.
Okay.
So at the end of June, beginning of July.
Yeah, and on another note, July 8, 9, 10, 11, Boise, Idaho. That's presumed to still be happening.
The nationals, right?
Yep, and so that's, you know, it's running right next to each other, even though, you know, there's a free weekend in between it, and that's it. So we could test there instead of Milwaukee, or we could, you know, offer both testing to be more central to more people. There's just a couple of ways we could look at doing it.
Yes, because if everything is running perfectly, I will be from the 19th of July in Flagstaff. So maybe I can get a USA citizen, something like that.
And then we're doing some off-road racing in Crested Butte, and that'll be the third weekend in August. So we've got a full calendar that's coming around, but will it be allowed to come to fruition, you know?
Yeah.
And how will we be able to execute?
Yeah. Yeah, it will be very interesting to see how things will be in 4 weeks, 8 weeks, or 12 weeks.
Yep. We have some racing going on this weekend in Gainesville. We'll only have a handful of people there, but there's racing nonetheless. And then we'll have a marathon race a couple weeks after that in Georgia. But that's more or less just a running event that we happen to be cycling in. So it's not a USA cycling race.
Yeah.
But anytime that we can show an organized effort and then we don't have any, you know, COVID incidences, due to it. I think it's bodes well for us.
How are you doing with your shot?
I'm well. I've got another one coming up on the 18th, so it's I guess a little over 2 weeks away, and it's supposed to be twice as painful for the outcome. So maybe not the actual pain, but it's supposed to be 60% of the people feel the effects from it. And the last one was 30% of the people.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's the Moderna shots, the one I got. I don't know which ones they're passing out there in Germany.
So I don't know exactly. We have a very bad situation with this. We have only a few people at this moment who got the shot, and only very, very old people, so 80s plus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this Pfizer stuff.
Okay.
I got a question real quick. So are there any other veterans out there that have been able to get the shot, the vaccine? I'm speaking to the whole crowd.
I have. My second shot comes on Thursday, so.
I got you.
I have.
So are they, who was that? Are they doing them in Florida or in California? There still are 65 and above, and the SCI patients are pretty much lumped into everybody else.
That's not the case here.
No.
Well, here in Florida, for a while they were giving them to 65 and older, and then if they had any extra shots at the end of the day, they would make an announcement on the VA announcement, and then you just get it. But then 2 weeks ago, they lumped SCI in between 65 and older and the general public.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But Jerry, I know of Carlos Melito went down to San Diego over from, I think he moved to Arizona recently, and he drove over to San Diego and got his shot there.
Yeah, maybe I need to call them. I've been calling Palo Alto. I called, I'm staying on Mather here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, they're just, they're pretty much blowing me off. They're just saying, well, we're following the CDC guidelines, and according to the CDC guidelines, it's still 65 and above.
Are you calling the SCI clinic in Palo?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I may have to drive a little more.
So in Virginia, to my knowledge, because I go to Hampton, that's where I got my vaccination, but the same was happening in Richmond, where the SCI center is. They after they did the employees, they did SCI, and when I say SCI, the priority was for quads, but they lumped in the pairs. And it was residential quads, because there's a domiciliary SCI center in Hampton. So,
right.
Yeah,
and they said they did the SCI patients that are actually in the clinic or in the hospital, but as far as outpatient, nada.
Yeah, I think they must be making their own minds up and not going by a general directive, I guess. And give them some flexible leeway, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, my friends, I have to leave, and it was a pleasure again to see all of you and to see how you spin. And I'm looking forward to see all of you tomorrow and maybe some more. So we have a bigger group tomorrow as well. Enjoy your day and see you tomorrow.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Tomorrow, Ralph.
Thanks, Ralph.
Appreciate it.